Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Welcome everyone. It's our custom usually to introduce ourselves before the speaker begins. Can we start with you, Paul? I'm Vince. Paul.
I'm Paul. Richard. Francis. Philip. Rule. David. Jim. Clint. Peter. Martin. Gary.
Jim. Fred.
Daniel. Doug. Michael. Marty. Mike. Bubba. Nicholas. Carl.
Roger. Bob. Michael. George. Thank you.
And I'm Bill.
Thank you. Bill is a member of the Insight Meditation Community in San Francisco, led by Eugene Cash, and is involved in the Community Dharma Center for Spirit Rock. He is also, probably better known, as a producer, co-director, and editor of the recently released and very well-received documentary, The Cats, which I think you probably have been living under a rock not to have heard of in this town. Bill's talk will be about freedom versus liberation.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. I always think it's a good idea. I always sort of like the idea of giving a talk to a group, and then when it comes around to doing it, I'm thinking, why the hell did I agree to do this? I get a little bit nervous speaking in front of groups of people, but I actually love talking about the Dharma. And one thing I love about giving talks is that the topic I sort of choose to talk about becomes a little bit more alive in my life in preparing the talk. And it just sort of enriches the Dharma experience for me. And it makes me really examine my own relationship to what I'm talking about. So hopefully I'll be able to help pass some of that along. I think I noticed in the newsletter and also on the webpage that it says I'm talking about freedom versus liberation. And I don't think I was really clear when Clint asked me to speak. It's what I sort of had in mind was I wanted to talk on freedom and liberation, and the part where sometimes when we become involved with freedom and liberation movements that we identify and cling and attach to those freedom and liberation movements so much that we end up losing some of our freedom and some of our liberation in that attachment, in that clinging to. I assume we're all gay men here, and so we've all had to go through some sort of gay liberation process. We all grew up in this culture that does not accept, it hasn't traditionally readily accept our lifestyle. So we've had to go through some sort of liberation process around this. I also assume that we all here, it's pretty obvious that we all here identify with the Dharma and Buddhism in some way. Another bond that sort of unites us and brings us all together. And I think one bond around that is the bond that we all suffer, and that Buddhism offers us a way and the possibility of freedom from that suffering. In Buddhism, in all of its various forms, they all agree on pretty much one thing, and that's one thing they certainly all agree on are the Four Noble Truths. And I'm sure many here are pretty familiar with that, but the first one being that in this life there is suffering. The second one being the causes of suffering, that we spend so much of our life either grasping or being greedy or trying to get something or something pleasurable, something that we want, something that we desire, pushing something away that we don't want, or just sort of being in a deluded state. The main causes of suffering. The third noble truth being that there is a release or a freedom from that suffering, that there's a possibility of not suffering in that manner. And the fourth noble truth being the Eightfold Path, which is just sort of this really beautiful set of guidelines and sort of a roadmap, a way to live a life that can facilitate this possibility of freedom from the suffering that all of us experience. I certainly find myself experiencing pretty regularly. So we all share this suffering bond. We all share this bond of having to gone through some sort of gay liberation process, I believe. Today, I think, is actually a good day to talk about freedom and liberation. For in a few hours, there's going to be this massive street fair going on not too far away from here. And it is a lot about freedom and liberation in some very, very unique way. I think I read in the paper there's going to be up to 400,000 people down there today, and that's huge, you know. Folsom Street Fair. Boy, I had no idea there were such big rocks in San Francisco to live under. Clint, you need to read some more of your own stories, I think. So, it's really about celebrating an alternate lifestyle with a focus on leather and other sort of sexual fetishes. And it's about the allowance and acceptance of this and, some really sort of great taboos in our culture. And it's a big celebration around the allowance of these taboos and fetishes and sexual desires. And it's probably the biggest street fair in the world for such an expression of freedom and exploration. So I think it's an appropriate day to talk about this, about freedom and liberation. I looked up in the dictionary to see how it defines to liberate and free. And to liberate, and the definition of liberate is to set free, as from oppression, confinement, or foreign control. The act of trying to achieve equal rights and status. Free is defined as openness, unreservedness, to be fully present and not hold back. It's also defined as generosity. So these definitions, to set free, to be free from oppression, from confinement, to be free from foreign control, openness, unreservedness, generosity. These are all sort of expressions of outwardness, of letting go, of non-confinement, of what it really sort of comes down to is not clinging, of not holding, it's not tightness, it's really sort of openness is the way I hear it. I think a lot of you might be familiar with this author and meditation teacher named Joseph Goldstein. He runs a meditation center in Barre, Massachusetts, and he was one of the founders of the Insight Meditation Society, Insight Meditation in the West. And he just put out a book called One Dharma, talking about Buddhism in the West, and sort of the melding of all the Buddhist practice that's going on here in the West right now. And one of the main foundations of this book, One Dharma, is a quote from the Buddha that is, "Nothing whatsoever is to be clung to as I or mine." He says this is the essential unifying experience of freedom, the heart of the one Dharma of liberation. So this nothing to be clung to as I or mine is the essential experience of freedom, the heart of liberation. It's what I want to talk about. And I want to talk about it in sort of a gay perspective and also in a perspective of thinking about how we identify as being gay and how we identify with even a gay liberation movement and how we identify as Buddhist. Nothing whatsoever is to be clung to as I or mine. The Buddha goes on to say, whoever has heard this truth has heard all the teachings. Whoever practices this truth has realized all the teachings. It's a big one, folks. It's according to the Buddha, this is basically it. Liberation through non-clinging, through non-identification, through non-holding. It's a deep practice of letting go. Where do we attach? Where do we hold on? What is it we cling to? In Joseph's book, he talks about three main areas of attachments. The first being attachments to sense pleasures. This is something I can certainly identify with. It seems like I've spent most of my life pursuing sense pleasures. And, when they're gone, looking for the next, and when they're there, wanting them to stay and wanting them to intensify. We live in a culture that basically uses that to keep us in line as happy American consumers. The promise of more and more sense pleasures. And they're I found for myself, they're very easy to get attached to. Certainly, the sense pleasure of sexual experiences is a really strong one, I have found. And thinking about talking today, I was considering how pretty much all the world religions have dealt with sex, and they deal with sex in a very controlling and cautious manner, it seems to me, except for maybe some tantric practices that go on with people that are highly evolved in, maybe some Hindu and some Vajrayana practices. The sexual pleasures that we experience as humans are very tightly controlled, and there's a lot of caution put around those. And it seems to me that one of the reasons why is that they're so easy to get lost in, they're so easy to get attached to, they're so easy to find yourself spending so much of your time pursuing. They're very sticky. They're something that's very easy to get attached to. I have experienced myself, I've often likened it to a hungry ghost. Sometimes I'll find myself in situations where it's like, I need it. And it's just like, what is this about? Why am I suffering so much for something that when I look at, it's just a very momentary pleasure? This also very layered, though. There's a lot of other things attached to it, of course. The desire to be loved, to be understood, to be a part, to be in communion, all sort of attached around this very sticky area of sensual pleasure, of sexual pleasure. So it's, this attachment to sense pleasures. The other attachment that Joseph in his book talks about that is one that can be very troublesome is attachment to opinions and views. And I think certainly in the gay community and in gay liberation, there are very strongly held opinions and views, which are also very true in the Buddhist community. We have very strongly held opinions and views. And to me, when you look at what's going on in the world right now, so many of the problems that are going on are created around how strongly people hold on to their views. In the Middle East, it's the strongly held views of one group against the strongly held views of the other group. In this country, our president right now is saying you're either with me or against me. You're either pro-American or anti-American. These very strongly held views about what it means to be an American or to be anti-terrorist right now. And the great problems that come around that, and the fact that things cannot really change if you hold on to these views so tightly. Because there's a separation, there's a right, there's a wrong, there's a them, there's an us. There's very little room for any sort of resolve. And the liberation movements that are formed on some very righteous and needed foundations and views, the liberation movements like around the civil rights movement and certainly around the gay rights movement, I think has been extremely necessary to combat the oppression and everything that has caused so much suffering. So we have these liberation movements. We go through this liberation process where we can accept who we truly are. We can accept our right we're born with to love who we choose to love. Whatever it is. These liberation movements are very necessary and I believe very right. But how strongly do we hold on to that view after a while? I have a good friend who was just visiting me who's been doing co-counseling for a long time. And he said in co-counseling they have a process that is a 3-part process where you claim it, you clean it up, and then you throw it away. So we claim our liberation, we claim our gayness, our whatever that might be for us, and we clean it up, we explore it, we find how it's true for us, we find how it works for us, we find how it doesn't work for us. And then I think there has to be a letting go, there has to be a non-clinging aspect to that. I think it can be very harmful sometimes when we cling too tightly to our gayness and to our identification with that gayness. And I think that is something that I would like to just put out there for all of us to consider today if we do happen to go down to Folsom Street Fair. Because I think it's sort of obvious sometimes that there can be a lot of clinging to what it is and how it is we identify with how we are gay. And how at times that can end up causing suffering instead of the original tension around the alleviation of suffering. I have found in myself how if I hold too tightly to my own belief that not only am I gay, but I have the right to be gay and I should be respected for being gay and I should be allowed and to be welcomed for being gay. I did a meditation retreat about 4 or 5 years ago with a Burmese monk, and one of my Western teachers told me not to tell this Burmese monk that I was a homosexual because this Burmese monk would not accept it. And my immediate reaction is, well, how dare he? But, this monk has his own tightly held views. A lot of Buddhists have very tightly held views that I don't always think serve them so well. The other thing this monk had to offer me, though, were some great teachings and a great opportunity to practice. And so I went and I let go of some of my own attachments, some of my own clinginess around wanting to be accepted and wanting to be recognized. One of my favorite people on this planet, too, is the Dalai Lama. I think he's just an amazing man of love and peace and openness and amazing teachings. But I also know that the gay community has had some conflict with this man around some of his views and some of his opinions around this. They go back, 2,500 years and are tightly held in his communities. I read one time that he had presented the Buddhist text in ways. He had said that the inappropriate parts of the body are the mouth and the anus, and sexual intercourse involving those parts of the body, whether with a man or woman, is considered sexual misconduct. Masturbation as well. You know, if I took what he said at its face value, I could find myself pulling away from him, pulling away from his teachings, and causing myself and suffering around that, and feeling, anxiety and resentment and anger. That, how dare he say that? That what I experience, what I know is true for me, is sexual misconduct, is breaking a precept. This tightly held view on my part can cause me suffering. I have to be able to let go of that a bit, I find, and take what I find and experience and learn and know to be true, and not get hung up on the rest of it. So I think it's really important to, the attachments to opinions and views, to not attach too much to my own gay identity and not attach too much to my own Buddhist identity. And even amongst gay men in San Francisco, there's been conflicts around attachments to Buddhist identity. And, here we are practicing something about non-clinging, letting go, accepting, allowing, non-separation, non-dualism. It's a bit ironic. If we are no longer so full of opinions and expectations, we are much more receptive to what actually presents itself to us. We can be open and like I say, more wholeheartedly receptive to what is actually in the moment and there for us. Non-clinging is not a easy path. It's so easy to attach to something. I mean, we sit here in meditation and we can see, moment by moment, how we attach to our thoughts, how we have aversion to our body pains. It's not hard to see. So what are some helpful doorways to help us not cling so much? Some doorways to liberation. One is the deep truth of impermanence, that we basically don't own anything. Jack Kornfield, in his book Stories of the Spirit, Stories of the Heart, says, when we see clearly, we discover that we are never actually the owners, the possessors of things in our life. Our home, the things we call mine, even our families, are here with us only for a time. We live in relationship to them either skillfully and wisely or graspingly and unwisely. Even our bodies don't belong to us. They are gifts. Their changing cycles reflect the very nature of the world. So if we all take a moment and just think, what do we think is mine? What do we think we own? What do we hold on to? I know for myself, I still try to hold on to the fact that, I have a somewhat younger body that continually changes. The body I had 5 years ago is long gone. I have a very different body now, and I find a lot of clinging and trying to hold around that. I try to hold on to my family, but they're changing fast. They're aging just as quickly as I am. I made this film, and I tried to hold on to that experience for a while. And it's gone in a moment. We had a great opening night experience at the Castro one night, and it was really fun. And I woke up the next morning and it was like, it's gone. It's just not there. When we can let go of this, when we can let go of what we hold on to, we allow the newness and the excitement of each moment to be there. And that is really a great opportunity, I think. Another way to help in this liberation process is to really try to understand and to experience for ourselves the truth of suffering that comes with attachment. The suffering that comes when we try to hold on to a relationship that's not working, when we try to hold on to a hairline that's receding, anything we try to hold on to, the suffering that causes. And if we can let go of that, if we really understand the truth of the suffering of holding, of attachment, when we really experience and understand that suffering, it becomes easier, I think, to not cling so much. I want to close soon. I should have had my watch out. I have been following how long I've been talking, but I want to open it up for discussion amongst everybody here. And I'd love to hear people's comments and questions or whatever. But before I close, I just wanted to say a few more things about, sort of in reference to the Folsom Street Fair. And the clinging that we can have around our own gay identity. I'm certainly not against gay identity. I just think we need to be careful about how much we cling to it. So I just wanted to say, may all the leather daddies out there and in here feel free to cry and to be soft. May all the slaves feel free to be the master. And may all the masters feel free to be slaves. May all of our identities be explored and considered. And most importantly, may they be held lightly. Nothing whatsoever is to be clung to as I or mine. Whoever has heard this truth has heard all the teachings. Whoever practices this truth has realized all the teachings. And I'd like to finish with a quote from Rumi. Live in the nowhere that you come from, even though you have an address here. So thank you all, and I'd love to hear where you might cling, where you might hold, where you might let go, or whatever you have to say. Thank you. Clint.
Well, I mean, this is a great talk, Bill. Thanks. And it's right apropos considering what's going on right now with the world situation, like the national situation. I find myself really doing an us and them thing too, only the different us and them than George Bush's us and them.
The right us and them, right?
Yeah, right. It's my opinion. So.
Right.
And the thing is, such polarized times, it almost seems like if the position you think is a valid position, the reasonableness is just not going to work. Because if you're reasonable here and somebody else attacks from a rabid position, extreme position, then the compromise is just somewhere over here. And I don't like that, but this seems to me to be the truth. It seems like that's the case, that you have to kind of be as entrenched and as dogmatic and as pitbull as the other side in order to get the consensus more towards the middle. And I just want to see your comments on it. I mean, I would love to be like a sweet, reasonable person kind of. Not a lot of time, maybe. Where I can say I value your opinion, and I don't see it. I know it's funny though. I don't see it myself, but I value your right to have, yada yada. But I can't watch George Bush on TV. I have to turn it off because I get so enraged with his viewpoint, and with the really rabid viewpoint that's coming from that side, and that has to be countered in order to prevent something terrible from letting this guy happen.
I wholly support you not watching him on TV. I think sometimes it's counterproductive to just let your anger and your resentment and your frustration well up inside of you so much. I turn off the TV and the radio when he comes on now. And at the same time I realize part of me really believes he strongly believes in what he's saying. So did Adolf Hitler, and certainly so did the Taliban. I mean, they really believe. And I often wonder, I've been born into a life of privilege here in the West in the late 20th century. Well, no, I was born in the mid-20th century. But we're all these conditional beings. So my conditions have been such that I believe certain things. I hold certain things to be true. If I was born in a small town in Afghanistan, with no money, and I'm sure my set of beliefs would be extremely different. And it's just conditioning. It's just totally conditional. We have to honor that, and it beats me how, but there has to be some sort of honoring of that.
I guess the question is it all just relative truths, or isn't it like an absolute truth somewhere among there where you can say, well, this is just, I was born here, he was born there, I was born this race, he was born that race, and therefore all these different viewpoints, and they all have to be respected. But isn't it like an absolute values somewhere that they can kind of like use it as a touchstone?
Yes, I don't know if I'm a great one to talk about that. Yeah, there's the absolute truth that we're all in this sort of passing, energetic dream world that is constantly changing and constantly moving through, and we're this momentary apparition in it. All of us, everything. So, but we live in the relative world. We do have identities that are important, and that we have to live with, that we share with family, that we share in relationship, that we share with friends, that we function with. That one country has to live next to another country. So I'm rambling here a bit, but it's important to keep the absolute in mind sometimes too, so that the relative doesn't become so heavy and impossible, I think. That help me out.
Yes, can I maybe change the focus of this, because when we're concentrating on people's beliefs and viewpoints, then we're concentrating on the wisdom aspect of the Buddha mind, and there's also the compassion aspect. The Dalai Lama has said that there are no absolutes in the Dharma, in Buddhism, but if there were an absolute, it would be compassion. And he said, my religion is kindness.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that the Buddha Dharma is this. Now, what I do when this man comes on the TV, and I should put a footnote that despite my accent, I am a U.S. citizen. I became a U.S. citizen, so I have the right to criticize, and if anything deported, I can into jail like a medical. It upsets me when this man comes on who I didn't vote for, and I'm not sure how he got in. But what I try to do is to say he's a suffering being. Going back to what you said at the start, that we're all suffering. Another Dharma also said, if an alien from another part of the galaxy were to land on the White House lawn or something, we might have no way to communicate with this being. We might really know nothing about it, but we know one thing: it's suffering, and it wants to be happy. So Mr. Bush, in his own way, is trying to be happy. I have problems with the way that he's trying to do that, and I would take all the legal and possibly illegal action, if it came to that, to try to alter that. But still I can say, the poor guy, he's suffering, and then my suffering in watching him is lessened, because I can relate to him suffering in a different way. And I would like to recommend the book. You've been structured to talk a little bit around the one Dharma. It is a very useful book at this time, when we're trying to figure out what is the American Dharma. And it's a very practical book for people like EDF, where if you mention the word doctrine, the temperature of the room drops perceptibly. He doesn't mention any doctrine there. He's talking about how to do things and the clingings. But I would want to mention in there, I heard him talk when he came to Berkeley recently, and I didn't have a chance to ask this question because it's a big audience and there wasn't time. He misses out one of the graspings, and I don't know why he does that, because in the standard list of graspings, there's also grasping a ritual or ceremony.
Right.
And he doesn't talk of that, as far as I can see.
Right.
Superficially, originally, apparently, the Buddha was criticizing people who go through rituals of what we can call Hinduism in a simplistic way. It really isn't Hinduism, but rituals involving Brahmins who say things and then it helps the dead and whatever. And he was saying just going through the motions isn't going to work. But I think we can also say, at a more profound level, we can look at how is it that we do things. And the way I do things is the right way, and the way you do things is the wrong way, you see. And so that sets up a suffering and a distaste. And when things are changed, most of the time when I come into this room, we do things the same way. If I suddenly came in, it was all different. I'd say, this is wrong. We're doing it the wrong way. So that's another form of clinging, which I need to watch. There isn't any one particular way that is right, and just because I think it is, isn't it? So it's an excellent book, and I would recommend it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Over here?
Bill?
Yeah,
I
please.
thought it was a great talk, really great talk. I've sort of identified totally with going through a phase for decades of attachment to sexual, libidinal urges,
Right.
and spending a lot of time around that, and the idea that I grasp is that I'm hoping now that we have a great deal of political gay liberation, that we can work on spiritual liberation, that you brought up. What's this all about? To me it was politically correct when I had a sexual urge to try to go and find some way, either with myself or someone else, to satisfy that urge. I mean, that when I look back on it, that was really my philosophy, you know, and not looking for the middle path at all, you know. It was just like 2 years ago, and long, you know, I heard this tape that you know, that said that. And so I'm very excited really to hear you talk, because sometimes I feel very lonely in my view that we should move on from Stonewall and sort of work on more of a spiritually liberated stance. Because I think we do get very trapped in our own views about what's gay, what's, you know, sexually correct. And I think that's a biggie. And, you know, I think I'm glad that I have an opportunity to bring my angst about what's going on today politically, you know, as Clint does. And I think if any of us had the answer, we would be another Buddha. And I just recently said, well, you know, what can I do about it? Well, I can try to sit and get rid of the angst. And I finally, as I did before in another cause, said, well, I can act on it. And there's a huge phase, a huge arm of Buddhism here, socially engaged Buddhism. And so the Buddhist Peace Fellowship on late Monday afternoon, 4 to 6, is going to have a meeting about organizing to see how as a community we can respond to this. And I'm going to go, because it's like, don't just sit home getting anxious about it. You know, find community around it, and possibly find some action around it that will make views known without. It's so damn tricky, you know, without causing other people suffering while doing it. You know, and I sort of differentiate my own life, the distinction between pain and suffering. You know, I don't mind causing someone else some pain, you know, that, you know, they're not going to get into a bank or something like that. But
right.
It's different than, you know, causing them suffering, which is can be manifested by not looking at them in a compassionate way, but at the same time, you know, taking a stance. It's extremely tricky, and I think these are the most challenging times since I've been alive. And I wish the challenge wasn't there, because there's a lot of other challenges in our lives as gay men.
Yeah, we're in a very interesting time right now. And thank you for your comments. I wanted to add one thing that the last two comments have brought up for me. I really appreciate the comment around compassion and action sort of combined in a way. And what Clint was talking about, what can we do? There is a great San Francisco gay Buddhist named Eason Dorsey who started the Hartford Street Zen Center, who came from a very coquette-like background. He was a street person, a drag performer, a drug addict, an insane commune member, and he ran into Suzuki Roshi and became a monk, was ordained by Suzuki Roshi in San Francisco. And his simple act of bringing in a homeless student from the street who was dying of AIDS, bringing him into the Hartford Street Zen Center and caring for him, started a hospice in San Francisco. And that hospice is 15 years old now and is thriving today and is caring for all sorts of people and is also giving tons of people an opportunity to practice compassion, to help people in the death and dying process. And I'm continually brought back to the fact that a simple act of compassion can be reverberating in a very big way 15 years down the road. And you know, for another 50 years maybe, or 100 or whatever. So to think, you know, what can we do? Simple acts of compassion can have huge reverberations sometimes. They can just ring on and on and on. So to think about things like that, too, can really be important. So here's to Eason.
Thank you.
Great teacher.
For a wonderful talk, and it's wonderful to hear these views expressed. I wish we could go on for hours and hours. If we'll have to plan a rap session sometime.
Is it time already?
But it is.
Yeah.
time.
I also one quick thing. I don't want to come down on sexual expression. I think it's a very important thing, but I think it's a very tricky thing. But I don't want to come off as being anti-sexual.
Most second that. So I'd like to at this time introduce our host, Francis, and if there are any announcements, we could perhaps make.
Well, do we want to ask if there's anyone new here?
Oh, thank you. I'm new at this, so maybe I'm doing this. Is there anyone here for the first time?
Would you folks, you've given us your name. I mean, we'd like to welcome you very much.
Thank you. What's your name?
David.
Welcome, David.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Fred.
Fred. Yes. Welcome. And someone else?
Rule Walker.
Oh, welcome.
So,
And you, sir?
yeah,
Baruch. Nice to have you here. Thank you.
there will be hot water and tea outside, and everyone is welcome, and there's lots of stuff to get along. Please wash your cups before you leave, so the host doesn't have to. And please leave some money in the dock while we got to pay rent. And then afterwards, I'm sure we'll all want to go to the street fair, but if anybody would prefer to go to lunch, we can have lunch.
Actually, Francis?
Yes.
Excuse me, but David Holm gave me all this material to bring today. It has to be mailed.
We're going to do that next week.
Is that going to be done next week?
With the newsletter. We're going to combine that.
Okay, cool. So, and should I take that stuff back and bring it again next week, or leave it here?
Or, yeah, you could, or I can take it.
Oh, okay, cool.
So we don't have a mailing card.
Okay.
No, I'm going to combine it.
Okay. Is there anything else I've forgotten?
There is a sign-up sheet for any of you new people who would like to receive the newsletter or get the email announcements. It's right out there on the same table, so I encourage you.
Yes.
A reminder that talks are available on the internet at the GBF website, kbuddhist.org.
Yeah, and I, for one, am going to lunch, so if you want to go, I'm cool.
Yes.
Normally the first Sunday of the month, Jim Wilson speaks. Next week, actually, we're having West Nisker, or Scoop Nisker too. He speaks on occasionally. He's great. He's like a pivotal Buddhist figure in the Zen community. He's very much involved in spirit walking, needs retreats. I think anybody who comes here will enjoy it, so I highly recommend it. Also, just one thing about Adam Francis' comments. We do have an overhead, paying for this place, paying for the speakers, paying for the newsletter, and so on. So we have a suggested minimum donation of $5, and if you can afford it, whatever you can afford. And then finally, I was given these Eugene Cash is involved in what's the name of this group?
Insight Meditation Community of San Francisco.
Okay. Anyway, he requested I send out these flyers about some kind of retreats that he's going to be having, and also just meditation sessions. So they'll be out there if people are interested. He's great. He's spoken before, and his group Bill's a member of it. It's a really good group.
Eugene's a great teacher. So is Wes Nisker. I mean, they're both dynamite.
Yeah.
I like them.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, along those lines, if anybody's interested, Spirit Rock on November 2nd and 3rd has a 2-day non-residential retreat for the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender community and people of color. And there's like a half a dozen wonderful teachers that are doing that. And so you can check out their website. It's a Saturday and Sunday from sort of 9 to 5. You bring your own lunch and looks good.
Okay. If we could all join hands, we'll have the retreat there. By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, and live believing in the equality of all that lives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.